86 people have been charged in a rampant and widespread fraud scheme spanning multiple programs in Minnesota. Of those 86, 78 of those people are Somali, 91% of them charged. So far, 59 of those people have been convicted for their roles in fraud plots that have stolen $1 billion from taxpayers.
Tampon Tim needs to go down. Ladies and gentlemen, there's currently a whole of government effort by the Trump administration to crush the Somali fraud rings that have been going on for years in Minnesota. Things are escalating hour by hour. Various bodies within the federal government are launching investigations, and more bombshell reports keep coming out, including whistleblowers involved in the Minnesota government. Tim Walz isn't the only official in complete panic right now. Even Keith Ellison, the Attorney General in Minnesota, allegedly pledged to help the Somali fraudsters in exchange for campaign donations. That's according to the report from the American Experiment. Here's a shocking finding Caroline Leavitt brought up at the press conference earlier today.
And jeopardize the safety of law-abiding American citizens. In fact, according to a new bombshell report from the New York Times, Somalian migrants in Minnesota have defrauded nearly $1 billion in taxpayer-funded benefits under Democrat Governor Walz's leadership. President Trump is putting an end to this dangerous America Last approach. His position is rooted in common sense. In the wake of last week's atrocity, and jeopardize
$1 billion, people. I actually think it's higher than that. But if you have the New York Times writing about $1 billion getting stolen by Somalis, you know it's really bad. Here's a Somali resident today on CBS admitting that Trump is right about the Somalis committing fraud.
I'm not comfortable sometimes because when I drive, when I'm sitting somewhere, not comfortable like before.
She says the president's recent focus on the Somali community is unnerving.
What he said, we've affected all communities. We know some people, they make fraud, but not all.
We know some people, they make fraud, but not all. No one ever said every Somali was literally committing fraud, but it's almost always them committing it. That's a stunning admission. This isn't an allegation that comes out of nowhere. And by the way, the United States isn't the only place in the world experiencing fraud committed by Somalis. In the UK, a Somalian was involved in £250,000 in fraud using false identities. Also in Canada, 157 Somalian refugees came with fraudulent passports, misrepresentation in refugee claims, etc. In Australia, people smuggling and passport fraud rings. In Norway, lying, of course. In Norway, over 100 Somalian women committed divorce fraud for income support, claimed they were sole providers, then had more children with ex-husbands, and were getting like 80,000 euros per family. More fraud in Norway to gain access to welfare benefits. In Sweden, thousands of registrants have been found committing residency and benefits fraud as well, registering for welfare payments while living abroad. The source of this data are the governments themselves. Somalis are involved in a lot of things. So going back to this lady, it's not all Somalians, but it appears to be a Somalian like 9 times out of 10. And here's some major breaking news. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent posted that at his direction, the United States Department of Treasury is investigating allegations that under the feckless management of the Biden regime and Governor Tim Walz, hardworking Minnesotans' tax dollars may have been diverted to the terrorist organization Al-Shabaab. We will share our findings as our investigation continues. Ladies and gentlemen, that's a major new step. And here's Caroline Leavitt ripping apart the mainstream media, who said migrants like the Somalis are crucial to America's character.
I'll tell you what does not add to our nation's character and integrity is refugees who come here under the alleged plight of asylum and fleeing persecution and then come to the United States to abuse our system and rip off American taxpayers. And as I pointed out, the New York Times, to their credit, it was about 6 months too late, but they did write about how Somali immigrants in Minnesota have been ripping off American taxpayers. In fact, 86 people have been charged in a rampant and widespread fraud scheme spanning multiple programs in Minnesota. Of those 86, 78 of those people are Somali, 91% of them charged. So far, 59 of those people have been convicted for their roles in fraud plots that have stolen $1 billion from taxpayers. In one scheme, and this is egregious, a nonprofit and its affiliates with these Somali migrants claimed to have fed tens of thousands of American children during the pandemic. They were reimbursed for those meals by taxpayers. However, federal prosecutors found that almost all of those meals were never even delivered to hungry children. In fact, those organizations' leaders spent the money on houses, luxury cars, and real estate in Turkey and Kenya. Another scheme involved hundreds of organizations who were reimbursed for services that were supposed to help people at risk of homelessness. Once again, those services were never provided. All of this has happened under Democrat leadership in a Democrat-run state, where these refugees, these migrants are coming to the United States. They are abusing our system. They are draining our resources that should be going to law-abiding, taxpayer-funded, tax-paying Americans. And this president is not going to put up with it anymore.
Caroline Leavitt just has a way with ripping apart the media. What's a little sad about that is it's going over the media's heads. We're hearing these facts and refuse to report them. So as you guys know, Minnesota state employees blew the whistle on this whole thing. In September 2024, they reported on $500 million in fraud, Medicaid fraud, Feeding Our Future, Child Care Assistance Program, frontline worker bonus pay, evergreen recovery, unemployment benefits, of course, and as usual, SNAP benefits. The fraud was absolutely unbelievable. That's who Kamala Harris made her vice presidential nominee. And this is something the whistleblowers recently said. Tim Walz is 100% responsible for massive fraud in Minnesota. Huge credit to these people. They don't want to see their fellow Americans' money be defrauded and sent to Somalia to fund terrorist groups. We let Tim Walz know of fraud early on, hoping for a partnership in stopping, but no, we got the opposite response. Tim Walz systematically retaliated against whistleblowers using monitoring, threats, repression, and did his best to discredit fraud reports. Instead of partnership, we got the full weight of retaliation by Tim Walz, certain DFL members, and an indifferent mainstream media. It's scary, isolating, and left us wondering who we can turn to. In addition to retaliating against whistleblowers, Tim Walz disempowered the Office of the Legislative Auditor, allowing agencies to disregard their audit findings and guidance. Media and politicians supporting Tim Walz or the DFL agenda attacked whistleblowers who were trying to raise red flags on fraudulent activities. As staff, we firsthand witnessed fraud and observed fraud happening, yet we were shut down, reassigned, and told to keep quiet, sometimes more. Leadership did not want to appear to discriminate against certain communities and were unwilling to take action, such as stopping fraud that would have had an adverse impact on their image. To date, no single agency leader has been held responsible for their role in fraud, whether it's Shireen Gandhi, Jez Gill, Jordy Harpstead, Natasha Mers, Eric Grumdahl, and others. It's a structure created and maintained by Tim Walz, who has created an environment of interrelated agencies and institutions, including the media, that help foster fraud through retaliation and turning a blind eye in exchange for political gain in the form of higher power agency leadership jobs or other perks. Fundamentally, Tim Walz is dishonest, lacks ethics and integrity, has poor leadership abilities, and has never taken any accountability for his role in fraud. Instead, Tim Walz deflects by blaming national politics for his own failings and distracts the public with inveterate lying. These lies include his reference of a budget surplus under his tenure. Fact is, Minnesota never had a surplus. We'd been given federal ARPA funds that were conflated as surplus money. Otherwise, we'd be in a deficit. And those ARPA funds, which were meant to be temporary funds, were used to create more leadership positions for Tim Walz's buddies. As such, we can't fight fraud in Minnesota alone, hence why we're appealing to the federal levels of government. We need all the help we can get as Tim Walz's agency leaders have upped their brazen approach in covering up their knowledge of fraud. We are grateful to numerous solid politicians, especially the Fraud Committee and media outlets who are trying to halt fraud. We are also grateful to other whistleblowers who are bravely stepping up. This thing is getting crazier and crazier, ladies and gentlemen. Tampon Tim needs to go down. Thank you all very much for watching. God bless and goodbye.